You know, we've all been there. You get a monster headache, you take an acetaminophen, Tylenol, and poof, you start to feel better. But then, let's say you roll your ankle. It swells up, it's throbbing, you take the exact same pill, and nothing. It feels like it does absolutely zero for the pain and swelling. It's a super common experience, right? But it's also a really fascinating scientific puzzle. So what is actually going on here?
So yeah, why is that? Why does this pill that works so well in one part of your body seem to completely strike out in another? Well, the answer isn't really about the pill itself. It's all about the unique chemical battlefield it finds when it gets to where the pain is. And the key to this whole mystery is something that scientists call the peroxide blockade. And trust me, it's every bit as dramatic as it sounds. See, there's this hidden chemical battle raging inside your body, and who wins depends entirely on where that fight is happening. Okay, so the main soldiers in this battle are these chemicals called peroxides. Now, you don't have to be a chemist to get this. Just think of them as these super reactive little agents that your body produces. All you have to remember is one thing. The amount of peroxides, their concentration in a specific area of your body, is the absolute key to solving our painkiller puzzle. So here's how it all breaks down. In your brain, the peroxide levels are naturally really low. This means acetaminophen can just waltz right in and block the COX enzymes that are screaming pain to your brain. And that's why your headache goes away. But in swollen tissue, like that sprained ankle, your immune system goes into overdrive and just floods the area with a ton of peroxides. This creates what researchers call a high peroxide tone, and it basically acts like a force field that completely neutralizes acetaminophen, stopping it dead in its tracks.
All right, so if acetaminophen gets totally shut down by inflammation, what about the other go-to painkiller, ibuprofen? Well, this brings us to a tale of two very different drugs with two very different strategies.
Okay, so both of these drugs are going after the same bad guy, that COX enzyme, but they attack it in completely different ways. Acetaminophen, it kind of goes for a side door, targeting a secondary spot on the enzyme called the peroxide site. But this approach, as we've seen, is super vulnerable to being blocked by peroxides. Ibuprofen, on the other hand, just kicks in the front door. It goes right for the enzyme's main active site. It's a direct assault that isn't bothered by peroxide levels at all. And that's exactly why ibuprofen helps with swelling and acetaminophen doesn't.
So here's the really important thing to grasp. What looks like a weakness in acetaminophen, its inability to fight inflammation, it's not a flaw. Not at all. It's just a fundamental, specific chemical characteristic. It has a different way of doing its job.
And this is where our little story about everyday painkillers takes a really dramatic turn. Because that exact difference, that unique way it works that makes it useless for a sprained ankle, is now being used by scientists to solve a life-threatening problem for the most vulnerable patients you can possibly imagine.
We're going to shift gears here, moving from the medicine cabinet to the neonatal intensive care unit. We need to talk about a condition called patent ductus arteriosus, or PDA for short, and it affects the tiny hearts of premature babies.
So, before a baby is born, there's this special blood vessel, the ductus arteriosus, that lets blood bypass the lungs, because they're not using them yet. Right after birth, that vessel is supposed to close up on its own, but for a lot of preemies, it just stays open. That's PDA, and it can cause a cascade of really serious, devastating problems for their lungs, brain, and kidneys.
Now, for years, doctors have used drugs like ibuprofen to try and close this vessel. But here's the problem. The success rate, using just one of these drugs, it's only about 70%.
And when you're talking about a fragile, premature baby fighting for every breath, a 30% failure rate is it's way too high. It's not good enough. The medical community had to find a better, more reliable way to help these tiny patients. This urgent need led researchers at the University of Florida to ask a truly brilliant question. What if instead of picking one drug over the other, they used both of them together, since they work in completely different ways? And this question led to a brand new clinical trial and a new combination of hope.
The whole idea behind their trial is just perfectly summed up in this quote from their study. They believe that because acetaminophen and ibuprofen work so differently, using them together might create what they call therapeutic synergy. Basically the idea that 1 + 1 could equal 3, that the combination would be way more powerful than either drug could be on its own. So the researchers set up a trial for 20 premature infants, all born incredibly early, between 23 and 30 weeks. The plan was simple, but potentially groundbreaking. Give them a combination of acetaminophen and ibuprofen, betting that these two different attack strategies would work together to finally close that dangerous opening in their hearts.
And this brings our whole story right back to the beginning. It connects all the dots from a simple question about your sprained ankle all the way to a cutting-edge medical trial happening inside an incubator.
So let's just trace that path one more time. We started with a simple puzzle. Why doesn't Tylenol work on swelling? We found the answer, that peroxide blockade. And then the pivot, realizing that its unique mechanism, the very thing that made it different from ibuprofen, wasn't a flaw. It was an opportunity. And that led to the potential breakthrough, combining the two drugs to create a synergy that could help save the most fragile baby.
When you step back, the big takeaway here is really powerful. The next time you're wondering why a simple pill works the way it does, remember this story. Because digging into the fundamental science of even the most common drugs in our medicine cabinets, that can unlock the most unexpected, life-saving innovations.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? What other secrets are hiding in plain sight on our pharmacy shelves? What other life-saving combinations are just sitting there, waiting for us to discover them? In the medicines we think we already know inside and out.